COVID cases go in the wrong direction, and Amy Acton says no to a Senate bid. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Morgan Harper, progressive activist, Darrell Rowland, senior editor for the Columbus Dispatch, and Bob Clegg, Republican strategist. In the race between the variants and the vaccine, the variants have pulled slightly ahead. Even as more and more Ohioans get their first and second COVID shots, cases are on the rise. The rate of new daily cases is up, as is the number of hospitalizations. Around the state, the number of red counties, those with the very high rates of spread, is creeping up. Franklin County now has a star, which means it's just below purple, which is severe exposure and spread.
Ohio remains in a very important race against the virus and its variants, and variants that are now more deadly, and we know from other parts of the world spread like wildfire. But we can win the race as long as we don't falter, as long as we continue to press on with consistent masking and getting the vaccine.
Darrell Rowland, just when we thought we were out of the woods, a month or so ago, cases were heading sharply down, but this is a long race, and it just seems like it's getting longer, Darrell.
Yeah, I've kind of lost track of what wave this is supposed to be. Is this 4 or 5 or 3 or whatever? Anyone who's been paying attention, we've all noticed, I think, the spike just north of us up in Michigan, and that's not been good. And an airborne virus, pretty good chance that's going to wind up in Ohio as well. And I think you put it really well, the race between the two V's, the vaccine and the virus. And the winner, it's kind of mixed now. As someone who this very day is celebrating 2 weeks from that second vaccine, I'm feeling pretty good. And as we look at those hospital stats, it's the younger crowd now more often that's getting these new variants, even some of them going on ventilators. That's certainly a switch from that big peak we saw right around the holidays.
Bob Clegg, I don't know what there's left to do. I mean, the governor can't shut anything down anymore unless it gets really bad. With more and more people getting vaccines, what can policymakers do to try to get through this, or is it just going to take time to get through this?
Well, I think from the very beginning, policymakers were very limited in what they might be able to do. Like Darrell just mentioned about our neighbor up north, Michigan, they've been much more in a lockdown mode up there than Ohio has been. And we're seeing now that obviously that hasn't made that big of a difference. So it's not like you can lock us down even more than what we're already. And I think here in Ohio, we're not really locked down that much. I think it's all a matter of getting shots in the arm and getting people vaccinated. And until then, they got to wear masks. But as far as, they're finding out now that maybe the virus really can't be spread through surface contact, things like that. So it's just a matter of just getting shots in people's arms and asking everybody to keep wearing a mask. I don't think they can do much more than that.
Yeah, Morgan Harper, now about a third of Ohioans are vaccinated, according to the state records. So that's good. Slowly but surely we're getting there. Herd immunity is still a ways away. Governor DeWine said this week that he is moving vaccine supply to areas of higher demand. The key is just getting vaccine out to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible.
That is the key, but I do think we need to be considering some more creative options, because 30% vaccination rate for the statewide is not going to get us to herd immunity, like you're saying, and also any semblance of quote unquote normal life. We have to get much higher rates of vaccination. And, we've talked before about some folks who still are susceptible to misinformation about the vaccine. I think we need to get creative with incentives. How can we incentivize people to put a vaccination over any other reluctance they might be having, so that we can actually get the state's both health and economy back on track? Because until then, we're gonna keep spinning our wheels.
Speaking of creative ways to try to dispel false rumors about the vaccine, Governor DeWine's office had a graphic this week in which he was telling people that a common rumor is not true. Basically, vaccines do not contain microchips or tracking devices. This is from the state of Ohio, the governor's office. Darrell Rowland, have you ever seen an official government announcement about a conspiracy theory?
No. Which means it must be true, right?
Yeah.
Wow. We thought maybe we were done with this after the presidential election, but yeah, I guess not. And I mean, why are we so susceptible to this? I mean, I think part of it has to play into this whole anti-mask, anti-vaccination bias that is in some of our communities, some of our families, some of our neighborhoods. As Morgan was saying, we've got to find ways to overcome this. We see the president talking about, going on past 100 million vaccines, going to 200 million. And of course, at the current rate, it seems, just pure math, it seems easy. Just keep up the current rate, but you're going to start hitting the harder to reach population. At the same time, I know folks in, some church I go to, and that my wife works with, some older folks, who are eligible in that very first round still, for whatever reason, have just not found a way to get in and get that needle in the arm to get that vaccine they sorely need. Yeah.
Talking about incentives, Bob Clegg, the state fair announced this week that they were not going to allow fairgoers to go to the state fair. They'll still have the contest for the kids and things like that, and the agriculture contest, but no one's going to be able to ride the rides. No one's going to be able to have the elephant ears and things like that, and the corn dogs and whatever else they want to put and fry it. How about that as an incentive? You want to go to the state fair, get a shot. Why not?
Show your card. That's not a bad idea, but it sounds like they didn't want to go down that road, so they didn't. But I agree with the Ohio Expo people in that, to put on the fair and have it a full-blown fair, but reduce the amount of people that would be able to enter. It's just not economically feasible. So I don't blame them at all by just saying we can't let anybody in, because that way they can cut down on a lot of the expenses and have the young future farmers come in with their animals, and they can do all that. But yeah, that could have been an incentive to get people to get vaccinated. Maybe that's a kind of thinking out of the box that they should start doing.
All right. After months of speculation and some pretty aggressive recruitment, Amy Acton says electoral politics are not for her, at least not for now. The former state health director this week decided not to run for outgoing Senator Rob Portman's seat. While not giving a specific reason why she's not running, her statement said there is a genuine longing for a fresh approach to leadership that is honest, collaborative, and empowering. And she urged Ohioans not to accept anything less from elected officials, but she is not going to be the vehicle for that. Morgan Harper, the polls we saw, the ones that were leaked out, I guess, showed that Amy Acton was the leading Democrat because of her name ID. Are you surprised she decided not to give it a shot?
Yeah, it's a little surprising, but I do think there's still some clear takeaways for us as a party. I think the polls were strong in supporting her, not just because of name ID, but also because she represented a different type of politics, not a traditional politician. The same learnings that we had from the November election and seeing Biden's performance in our state hold true, that the traditional brand of Democratic politics is not getting it done statewide, and we have to embrace different types of candidates and different types of strategies. And so, that as we look forward to other candidates, I think that needs to continue to be the standard by which we evaluate the viability, electability, and how much support we're going to give them.
Darrell Rowland, it seemed like people were trying to drag Amy Acton into the race. Connie Schultz, Sherrod Brown's wife, the former columnist with the Cleveland Plain Dealer, Pulitzer Prize winner author, she was subtly kind of encouraging her on Twitter to run. You assume her husband was doing the same quietly, unless she's going rogue, Connie Schultz, that is. Also, a group of scientists was going to pledge $5 million for her bid to help her with fundraising. But in the end, she said, I don't want this rough and tumble race. We can guess anyway.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm not saying I know Dr. Acton personally, but I think just from seeing her, we almost feel like it because we saw her so often in our living rooms or family rooms or whatever on TV. She really didn't seem cut out for a political race, a knockdown, drag out like it's probably going to be in Ohio. And as Morgan says, I mean, on one hand, that's sad if we're thwarting otherwise qualified candidates from even really seriously considering getting in the race. So I don't know what it says. So does this leave Congressman Tim Ryan as the most viable alternative here? Does House Minority Leader Amelia Sykes consider that? Does Kevin Boyce, the former state treasurer, the Franklin County Commissioner, does he jump in? Or, we're still over a year away from the primary. We could hear from a fresh face yet. So it's certainly an open scramble. Nothing like the Republicans, but certainly no front runner by any stretch.
Bob Clegg, are Republicans disappointed that Amy Acton is not going to run, or are they glad because she was kind of a wild card and she was a non-traditional politician, high name ID, high approval rating, that she might have been the most formidable candidate to run against the Republican in the general election?
I don't know if they're happy or necessarily disappointed that she's not running. But like Morgan said, she was a non-traditional candidate. I think it's always a little tougher to run a campaign against a non-traditional candidate than it is your typical, like, Tim Ryan, congressman, state senator, where he has a record and you can talk about it. And, a non-traditional candidate like Amy Acton would have been, I think, a little more difficult. However, I said this in the beginning when we started talking about her candidacy, I wondered if her candidacy would have resulted in a kind of a one-issue campaign for her, and that would have been obviously COVID. And who knows, over a year from now when the primary would be, or even a year and a half from now when the general would be, what the whole COVID situation would be. I personally wasn't very surprised she wasn't running because I think it takes a lot to run for public office. I think especially nowadays with the type of politics that's out there and the meanness, the bitterness that sometimes or a lot of times is involved in it. I think it's tough on not only the candidates but on their families to do a statewide campaign like that.
Morgan Harper, Daryl ran down the list of folks who are still, we believe, considering running. Any of those candidates excite Democrats, especially the progressive wing of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see who actually formally announces. There's a lot of speculation at this point, but hearing Tim Ryan say things like, this makes sense because I'm not going to be able to secure as much support in my existing House district, I'll try statewide, not encouraging. I don't think that's the message that voters are waiting to hear. And so, we need to get real. Like I said, I mean, we need a different type of politics here. We've got faux populism on the right that is on the move. I think we're seeing signs of that as some of the candidates that have announced, for example, they're not going to take corporate PAC money. I believe it's a little disingenuous when they're already rich, but the message is out there. So are we ready to match that and beat that with true populism, true economic priorities for people in the state?
Daryl Rowland, I mean, Tim Ryan he comes from the Youngstown area. He is seen as kind of a Sherrod Brown type Republican, someone who could get the working class vote. Is he the front runner at this point? Would you guess? He did raise $1.2 million in the first 3 months of this year, more than he's ever raised before as a congressional candidate.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of being overly conventional, I guess I would have to say that because he does have the bankroll. He's been elected office. Dabbled a little bit in presidential politics there, and he does. I mean, That's a real good question, Mike, about that sort of the Sherrod Brown, because again, as Morgan points out, his own district, his margin has shrunk there. I mean, if that working person populism is going to work, I would think it'd work in the Mahoning Valley. And here's a son of the Valley, running for office, old football star, and all that. If it shrinks there, will it grow statewide? I don't know. Yeah. But there's a whole lot of arguments you can make against any prospective Democrat. I mean, that's part of the party's problem. We talk about, no one necessarily coming up through the minor leagues, not to diminish anybody's job or anything, but, working their way up. This is the logical alternative here.
Yeah. All right. The Republican race for Senate has another candidate, Cleveland businessman and longtime Republican donor Bernie Moreno. He joins former state treasurer Josh Mandel and former state GOP chair Jane Timken in the official race for Senate. Other Republicans may join. Steve Stivers has raised $1.2 million since January and is said to be considering a run, as is Congressman Mike Turner of Dayton and a few others. Bob Clegg, my question for you is, who is Josh Mandel going to run against now that Amy Acton says she's not going to run?
Well, Josh has got to worry about that primary first. But what I think is interesting here in Ohio is, it's almost like Ohio's becoming Alabama, and I do a lot of races down in Alabama, and in these really red states, you get all the action on the Republican side in the primaries. And I see that happening now in Ohio, where all the action now is on the Republican side and not the Democrat side. Everybody seems to want to run as a Republican in Ohio these days. But I mean, it's going to be a free-for-all, and you're going to have a lot of different candidates here that are going to be running for this seat. And for somebody like Josh Mandel, it's probably the more the merrier for him, because he's the one person that's got probably the best name ID of everybody running on the Republican side. So the more that field can be divided, the better off he's going to be. If he would have to do a head-to-head with Jane Timken, that would be, I think, a lot more problematic for him than a field with Jane and 3 or 4 other guys.
Yeah, he could be the only Republican candidate who's actually won statewide in this race. Darrell Rowland, Bernie Moreno, he's a businessman, wealthy, Republican donor. He's not well known around most of the state. He might be better well known up in the Cleveland area because of his car dealerships and things like that. What do we know about him, and does he have a shot?
Well, I think, I won't say everyone has a shot, but, certainly it seems like he's got money that at least, that gets you a hearing. And then it's going to be up to him, to be like his car salesman and make the sale. He's involved in blockchain technology and things of that nature. I think he'll try to portray himself as maybe a little more of a candidate of the future. But is this race, I mean, especially on the Republican side, I mean, Bob mentions Alabama. Is this all just a pander to Donald Trump primary? Is it who can be Trumpiest, who can, just try to get the backing? I guess of Trump would be the gold star, of course. Yeah. But even just to get that Trump electorate that twice delivered Ohio to him by 8 points.
Morgan Harper it's a long way off. We're still a year away from the primary, a year and a half away from the general election in 2022. So it's a long way off. A lot of things are going to happen between now and then. But would Democrats like the most Trumpiest candidate to run against their candidate when that comes in November of 22?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I would say that we all actually are at an extreme disadvantage and at risk of a lot of harm by having these folks who continue to want to extend the messaging from Trump. And we're seeing that early on in Bernie Moreno's launch video. I mean, accusing some of these Democratic office holders of being socialist, claiming that he overcame Fidel Castro and his American dream story. This is messaging that's dangerous. It's completely false. And it's not doing anything to take our politics to a better level that puts people first. And so I would hope that type of message would be easy to defeat. But again, it's going to take Democrats also learning our lessons and putting in candidates that are ready to fight, that have a persuasive message, and that are on the ground spreading that message throughout the state.
Bob Clegg, how much is redistricting going to play in this Senate race? I mean, Senate is statewide, so you don't have to worry about districts, but look at a guy like Steve Stivers. He's raised $1.2 million. I mean, his district could get changed substantially after the census is in and we draw the new maps. I don't think the maps are going to get any less competitive than they are now, probably more competitive. So you look at Steve Stivers and he might say, you know, my district is not quite as safe. Now's my chance. Now I should run statewide and give it a shot.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's going to change the districts. And that's why a lot of these decisions that these potential candidates are making, I think is really kind of early, because I really think we need to look at, and I'm basically talking about people like Tim Ryan or Steve Stivers or even Danny O'Connor, who just announced this week that he's going to run not for statewide office, but for Congress. Well, what district are you going to be running in? They're going to change. For Republicans, I think the big change will be instead of winning your district by 65 to 70%, you'll probably win it by 60 to 65%. You know, I don't think that they're going to be in a situation where it's a 50-50 district where they were winning it, you know, handily, almost 2-1, and now it's 50-50. For somebody like Danny O'Connor, who lives in Clintonville in Columbus, I would guess he's going to end up in Joyce Beatty's district, and I wouldn't suggest that he runs against Joyce. But I mean, you just can't make decisions now on these congressional races until we see how this is going to shake out. And that's not going to happen, obviously, since we're not going to get census data till the end of September. I mean, we won't know to probably October at the earliest of what's going on. So I think a lot of people are a little too premature here on their decision making, I think.
All right, let's get to our last topic. Go ahead, Daryl. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mike.
No.
It's interesting. You look at the fundraising appeals from a Tim Ryan or from a Steve Stivers, and they're ambiguous. And they could be taken to, I'm raising money for re-election, to I'm raising money for a statewide race. But, you know, it's like, let's go home team, you know, send me some bucks. And I think, especially somebody like Congressman Stivers, you have to see how much, you know, with a statewide race being a possibility, you have to see how much money that's going to attract. I mean, in some ways, an incumbent member of Congress is in the biggest dilemma here. You got a huge decision, and again, with no district lines, I guess challengers are having an even tougher time. But yeah, like Bob says, this fall, my goodness, there's going to be so much maneuvering, and then if there's litigation over the districts, and it's just a warm up right now, folks.
Yeah, they're all making the trip to Florida to get the Trump endorsement, and that will be key. Bob Clegg, is that if Donald Trump would have come out tomorrow and say, I endorse this candidate, would the race be over on the Republican side or no?
Yeah, you know what? I think if the president would come out and endorse, in my opinion, either Josh Mandel or Jane Timken, I think the race would come together a lot more than if you would one of the more not as well-known candidates. But I mean, we talk about all these candidates trying to mimic President Trump. And I mean, we got to remember, he carried the state handily against both Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. So that's telling you that the general election electorate in a presidential year, which is a lot different than a gubernatorial year because it's a lot more Democrat, is still a big Trump electorate. So I don't fault any of these candidates on the Republican side trying to sound Trumpy.
Yeah. Of course, Donald Trump won't be on the ballot in 2022, which let's have to see how that plays out, because I'm sure he drove a lot of folks out to vote, certainly in 2016 and 2020. All right, it's time now for our off-the-record final parting shots. Morgan Harper, we'll start with you. Well,
I wanted to just call attention to, we had a paint explosion, a paint manufacturing explosion here in Columbus. Late 90s, there was also one in Georgia Pacific. And so, just making sure people are aware this is happening when we have these violations or investigating, and condolences to the family, and hope that, folks in the surrounding areas are also taken care of and compensated in that way.
All right. Bob Clegg, your final thought.
It was announced this week that Franklinton on the near west side of Columbus has the lowest life expectancy in the state of Ohio. And I think this just shows how we got to do a better job with healthcare delivery in these lower income areas. And it highlights the importance of programs like Celebrate One and Moms to Be, which are two great organizations that are fighting to lower the infant mortality rate in these low income areas.
Yes, indeed. Darrell Rowland, your final thought.
And that's a great segue to what I'm going to mention. The Ohio Department of Medicaid, this is a little esoteric to a lot of people, but let me just say this. It's $20 billion with a B of your dollars going to managed care programs. They awarded contracts, and that's the intent, to award contracts today to several companies for a totally revamped approach. And of course, Medicaid serves the disabled and serves the poorest and most vulnerable Ohioans. So it's a pretty big deal.
All right. Bob Clegg kind of stole my thunder a bit with his comment, but my prediction is that when the maps are drawn for congressional districts in Ohio, that Danny O'Connor will be in Joyce Beatty's district, just like they did to Mary Jo Kilroy way back 10 years ago, when they carved out her house and put her in Pat Tiberi's district. It was the strangest map, but I think that might happen again, regardless of the new system. It'll be interesting to watch. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and you can watch every episode on demand at our website, wosu.org/COTR. For our panel and our crew, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.